Well, it is the third Sunday of Advent, and that means that it is time for my annual Christmas shopping survey. So, a show of hands for all of you overachievers who are done with your Christmas shopping. Anyone who dares to... Done. Okay, now the opposite extreme. For those of you who have not even started yet. Okay? And now I want to find out if there's anyone here who is living dangerously and will admit that they're going to do it all on Christmas Eve. I had a good friend when I was growing up. Came from a family of 10 kids, and he always waited until Christmas Eve to do his Christmas shopping. And Walgreens always did quite nicely. Like I said, it's living a little bit dangerously, but there it is. There it is. So how exactly did we get this gift-giving tradition at Christmas? Brenda was singing earlier, people shopping till they're dropping, going from mall after mall, that kind of thing. Who do we have to thank for Black Friday and people fighting over Elmo dolls or whatever hot commodity it happens to be this
Elmo
year?
Dolls.
That's a few years ago.
You know how old that is?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm well,
Those guys.
it's these guys, and you don't even, all you need to see is the silhouette to recognize that we're talking about the three wise men, the three magi from the Gospel of Matthew. And those of you who share my Catholic background, you know that these fellows even have names, right? Balthazar, Casper, and Melchior, which always made me giggle when I was a kid because I used to think of Casper the Friendly Ghost. You know, even though the names are spelled totally differently, that's just that's the way kids are. So there's the familiar nativity scene. Let's see if I got that up here next. The familiar nativity scene. I got the verse next. Yeah, thank you. The familiar nativity scene. There it all is, right? You've got the stable, baby Jesus in the manger. You've got the angels, the shepherds, and there are the wise men with their camels. That's the familiar scene. There's just one slight problem. Matthew doesn't say a word about a stable or a manger or a lot of other things. All right, here's the passage from chapter 2. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chest, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And, having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. All right, on entering a house, not a stable with a manger, just a regular old house. So, in Matthew, Joseph and Mary, they live in Bethlehem. They moved to Nazareth later to avoid persecution. Luke is just the opposite. Luke said that they lived in Nazareth. They went to Bethlehem temporarily just to give birth to Jesus, so Jesus could be born in the city of David according to prophecy and so on and so forth. And then they go back to Nazareth, where they've always lived. Other important things that Matthew doesn't say. He never says that there were three wise men. We assume that because three gifts are mentioned. They aren't named in the story. There are no camels, no shepherds, no singing angels. Those are all from Luke. So they are totally different stories. And I don't want y'all to run home now and think that you have to banish and exile the wise men and the camels from your nativity scenes at home, or build a separate one. This is Matthew's nativity scene over here, and this is Luke's. The stories are totally inconsistent. They can't be reconciled, although I've listened to some people really twist themselves into pretzels trying to reconcile the two stories, but they really can't be reconciled, and it's okay to conflate them for the purpose of a nativity scene, so long as we know the truth. And it's important to be aware of these details because so many people who claim that the Bible is so important to them apparently have not actually read it and are not aware of these kind of things. So we want to be aware of these details, and I don't mean so that we can annoy and bore people at holiday parties by telling all the difference between Luke and Matthew. Don't do that. But at least, at the very least, we can be well educated about our Judeo-Christian heritage, at least as well educated about that as we should be about American history and things like that. It's like I said last week. We don't require anyone to take the nativity stories literally, but we do take them seriously. Matthew and Luke, even though they're telling two totally different, irreconcilable stories, are giving two very different and important perspectives on who Jesus was, the meaning of Jesus and his message to two different communities, from two different perspectives. So, for Matthew, Jesus was an exalted figure. He had the status of royalty, which explains why you have foreign dignitaries coming to visit, and they give him gifts that are literally fit for a king. Luke takes a different approach. Jesus is a regular guy. He's a friend of the common man. There are no royal gifts in Luke. There are no foreign dignitaries. There's not even a house. In Luke, Jesus is born in a place that they had to beg and borrow. He's born like a homeless person in a place where animals live. And his first visitors are shepherds who share one of the bottom rungs, at least, of the socio-economic ladder of that day. Okay, different stories. Which one is the right perspective? Both. Both. If we don't take them literally, if we understand that these are two different but complementary perspectives, they are both correct. Because we can see from latter accounts in all of the Gospels that Jesus spent time with people who were on both ends of the spectrum, the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder and the top. He could hold his own debating with the Roman governor Pilate, or standing in front of Herod, who was accusing him of blasphemy and heresy and things like that. He had friends like Nicodemus, who was a member of the Jewish ruling council. So he had friends in high places, and yet he also befriended people who were labeled as sinners in those days. That makes him more of an everyman than a common man. And the Gospels show us that he lived very simply. That was his choice. He didn't have much in the way of possessions. In fact, he had some rather pointed and some people would say even harsh things to say about wealth and possessions. He made it very clear that those things should not be made the focus of life. So, how then did his birthday come to be made synonymous with excess and overspending, at least in the minds of some people? Even the gifts of the wise men, think about it. They seem a little bit tame by today's standards, don't they? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Who wants that stuff? But don't worry. This is not going to be a talk about simplifying, reducing spending, or anything else that might suck the joy out of this wonderful season. I'm here to tell you to live your life the way you feel is appropriate. We're not here to should on you. I'm just offering suggestions about how to expand our consciousness, starting with the possibility that the wise men and their gifts have some deeper symbolic meaning that may have gotten lost in the shuffle of history and competing agendas. The wise men were intentionally cast as foreigners, perhaps even immigrants in a way. They come from a place that operates on a different perspective. They are wise, but their wisdom is not the local wisdom. It is a foreign wisdom, not of the conventional variety. They see and understand things that seem to go over the heads of the local people because nobody else is getting excited about this star. I mean, it takes these people from a faraway land to bring this momentous event to their attention. They say, hey, have you noticed this star over here? No, I never noticed that star. They have to explain to them what's going on. And so when they explain that, hey, this is the sign of a new king, of a new leader, well, that is not welcome news to the powers that be. Remember what Herod did. King Herod reacted violently to this suggestion that there might be a new king. Herod, a local, represents conventional wisdom, and we know what happens with conventional wisdom. It typically sees new things, and especially new ideas, as a threat that needs to be controlled, and in some cases, eliminated. So Herod reacts in the story with an act of unimaginable violence. He doesn't know exactly who the newborn threat is, so he gives orders to kill all the male children under a certain age. That's a story that can be rather frightening to children, and I think it's safe to tell them that nothing like that ever really happened. There is absolutely no historical record of anything like that. And if it had actually happened, you can bet that there would have been some mention of it by the historians of the day, especially this guy named Josephus, who wrote this multi-volume work where he carefully recorded the events of what he called the Jewish Wars, the conflict between the Romans and the Jewish people. There's no mention of it. You would think something like that would be referenced somewhere. What's happening here is the author is trying to establish a link between the bad guy Herod today, or at least in that day, and the bad guy Pharaoh back in Egypt. Pharaoh did the same thing before the Exodus led by Moses. He did the same thing to the Jewish male children in Egypt. When he learned that Moses had been born and was going to be a threat to his power, just like Herod, Pharaoh ordered that Jewish male children under a certain age be killed. And Moses was spared, and the rest is history. So what's happening here, very practically and simply, is that Jesus is being compared to Moses. Got the same reception from the powers that be. Violent reaction trying to stop them from doing what they came to do. Jesus is being compared to Moses, but instead of leading people out of physical slavery, out of physical bondage like Moses did in Egypt, Jesus is doing something different. He's bringing about a different kind of liberation. He had this radical idea of something that he called the kingdom of heaven, which was a way of living that would replace the suffering and the oppression and the persecution that was caused by Roman imperialism and the Jewish collaborators on the Jewish ruling council. Instead of being imposed from the outside, this kingdom of heaven, this vision of a new kingdom would be a community that was co-created by those who would actually practice the values that Jesus was teaching. Imagine that. It started out as a community of equals, no barriers based on gender, ethnicity, or class status, the values of love, kindness, generosity, service, nonviolence, all rounded out the foundation for this new way of living. Those are the core values. Those were the core values that early Christian communities practiced long before there was any such thing as Christmas, and even long before there was any such thing as written Gospels. But somewhere in history, those core values became secondary and maybe even irrelevant. Historical events, people with agendas, things change. I find it amusing to listen to people who complain about how we need to put the Christ back in Christmas. And we're supposed to do that by erecting more nativity scenes in public places and making sure that everyone says Merry Christmas instead of Happy Holidays or something like that. I saw this on Facebook. I think it really gets us back to the heart of the matter. Want to keep Christ in Christmas? Feed the hungry, clothe the naked, forgive the guilty, welcome the stranger and the unwanted child, care for the ill, love your enemies. My advice at Christmas is to just lighten up. And I don't mean drop a few pounds either. You know, that may go without saying after a time, but what I'm talking about is stop trying to turn Christmas into a problem. Every year I look forward to watching a Charlie Brown Christmas. I love that line early on in the show where Linus says to Charlie Brown, "Charlie Brown, you're the only person I know who can take a wonderful season like Christmas and turn it into a problem." Because Charlie Brown is complaining about all the commercialism and people aren't getting it, and all he's doing is he's creating all sorts of consternation and problems for himself. There is no war on Christmas, but if there is, guess which side is winning? Christmas is gaining ground. It is simply no contest. And I welcome anything that gets people to shift consciousness back to those core values, even just a little bit. No matter how commercial it may seem to get, what always comes shining through are the essential core values that are derived from pre-Christmas ancient Christianity, before all that stuff got lost in the shuffle and was made secondary, and in some cases even irrelevant. We have a word or a phrase for the collective expression of those core values. Christmas spirit, right? Christmas spirit. The thing that we call Christmas is the collective expression of those values. They're everywhere during the Christmas season. They're everywhere every other day of the year too, but at Christmas at least we take some time to collectively focus on those things. And it takes unconventional wisdom, a different perspective like the Magi brought to the story. It takes unconventional wisdom to really see that. And what we do is we transform our homes, our public spaces with lights and decorations. We practice giving and generosity more than at any other time of year. Once a year at Christmas, we roll out all that wonderful music and the movies and the TV shows that celebrate those very values. You got the secular, cynical Grinch, and you got Scrooge, who are transformed by an infusion of Christmas spirit, the core values. An exhausted and careworn George Bailey turns from despair when Christmas spirit shows him that he actually has a wonderful life. The message of Christmas is that human beings are actually better than world events lead us to believe. I mean, why would we speak of peace on earth if we thought that such a thing were not possible? So whether it's Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, a joyous solstice, season's greetings, eat, drink, and be merry, and consider how we might be able to contribute to a world where people who don't have enough to eat or even know the meaning of what it is to be merry might be able to experience those things. How would that look? How would that be for a gift this year? You know, we like to say this old expression, it's not the gift, but it's the thought that counts, which fits perfectly with what we teach in Unity, doesn't it? And maybe we should even change that old saying just a little bit. Instead of saying that it's the thought that counts, let's say that it's the thinking that counts. It's the thought process behind all of the things that we do at this time of year that really, really counts. I say that Christmas is good medicine. There's no such thing as an overdose. And I'm going to recommend this season that we look for the good, we ignore the complainers, and just know that there is an underlying perfection to it all that we can see with the eyes of wisdom that can transform the holidays without having to make any radical changes. The message of the wise men is simple. It's wise up, right? The wise men say, wise up, look at Christmas from a new perspective, through the eyes of unconventional wisdom, focusing on the core values. And if we do that, then every gift is going to be the perfect gift. And we can stop worrying about these things. So, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Season's greetings, a joyous solstice, and I'll save the Happy New Year for later on. That's enough for now. See you next week.